Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, dear guests, I would like to welcome you to the second edition of the conference Green Business is Great, organized by the British Bulgarian Business Association with the support of the British Embassy in Sofia. My name is Desislava Miteva and I'm the Executive Director of the British Bulgarian Business Association. Warm welcome to all of you who are joining us today at the Intercontinental Hotel in Sofia and to all of you joining us online. We started the Green Conversation last year, inspired by the global debate around COP26, which took place in November in Glasgow. We at the British Bulgarian Business Association are very proud to continue the discussion now with a focus on energy efficiency. I would like to thank our colleagues from the British Embassy in Sofia for supporting this initiative and for being next to us all the way in crafting the busy agenda you are about to experience. Also, I would like to thank our diamond sponsor, Baringa, who for second year in a row are supporting us with this conference. Baringa is an award-winning international management consultancy with a strong commitment to sustainability, and you will hear from them later today. Big thanks also to our annual sponsors, without whom the business of running events with BBBA would be much more difficult. So thank you to Mobile Wave Solutions, Cleves, Deloitte, Landmark, Novotel Hotels and Resorts, Bulgaria Insurance, Danko Industry, and Dental Clinic Petar Tuchev. Also big thanks to our media partner Kapital, who again are supporting us for a second year in a row, spreading the word about this conference so we can get the fantastic audience we have in the room today and also online. The British Bulgarian Business Association is a bilateral chamber of commerce supporting British businesses in Bulgaria and Bulgarian businesses in the UK. We are big believers in the power of business success stories to inspire, to motivate, and to attract followers. This is exactly the reason why we are here today, to tell you inspiring stories from our members from the UK and from Bulgaria, so you can borrow some of those examples and apply them in your business. No wonder the topic today is energy and energy efficiency, because this topic has been in the media and also in our lives more and more intensely in the past year. So this is why we are focusing today on energy efficiency. A quick look at the agenda. We are a green conference, so that's why you don't have it printed out on your chairs. But we have a very busy agenda, starting with a few welcome notes, keynote presentations, a very busy panel, and ending also with a couple presentations and Q&A session. For those of you who would like to have the agenda in front of you, you can scan it from this QR code and you can be informed what's coming up next. It will be my pleasure to lead the conference today. So without further ado, I would like to invite to the floor our chairman, Gilbert McCall, for a welcome note.
Thank you very much, Desi. Good morning, Deputy Minister, Your Excellency, everyone in the hall today, and also those who are following us on the streamed version of this. We're very pleased that this is the second year that we've been able to hold a Green Business is Great conference. Last year was one of the first ones, I think, where we had a live participation and everything wasn't virtual. So I'm glad that this year even more of us are able to be in the hall together, because I think that certainly helps to make it more effective and for everybody to get to know each other a bit better. Ecologically sound business, I think, is something today that everybody is striving for. And we want to showcase excellent and practical initiatives both in Bulgaria and within the United Kingdom to give us an idea of how we can follow and improve our own operations. And of course, the focus today is on energy and energy efficiency, which, given price rise, etc., is obviously a very critical issue for many of us in the room today. I'd also like to thank our main sponsor, Baringa, who've been involved in this now for the second year, and we're very pleased that they have continued to come with us. I'd like to thank also Reneta Koleva, the Deputy Minister for Environment and Water, for the interest and support that she and her department have shown. Also Rob Dixon, the British Ambassador, I thank him and the Embassy. They have been a great source of help and assistance and inspiration to BBBA, both for this conference and in many of the other initiatives that we're running, and we are always very happy for their participation and assistance. And I'd also like to thank everybody who's going to be participating today, absolutely necessary to make the thing useful and interesting for everybody else. So I hope you have a valuable morning and that you find it interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gilbert. I would like to invite Deputy Minister of Environment and Waters, Reneta Koleva, to say a few words.
Добър ден на всички, Ваше превъзходителство, уважаеми господин Макол, уважаеми дами и господа. Позволете ми най-напред да благодаря на Британско-българската бизнес асоциация за възможността да участвам в днешната конференция.
Good morning to you all, Your Excellency, Mr. McCall, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to begin by thanking the British Bulgarian Business Association for the opportunity to take part in today's conference.
Темите, които ще обсъдим днес, са изключително важни в контекста на ангажиментите на Европейския съюз и неговите държави членки за постигане на климатична неутралност до 2050 година. Отчитайки предизвикателствата в условията на енергийна криза, е необходимо с общи усилия, споделена отговорност и взаимодействие между всички заинтересовани страни да работим за постигането на един наистина справедлив за всички преход.
The topic which you are going to discuss today are extremely important in the context of the commitment of the EU and its member states to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We take into account the challenges within the energy crisis, and we see that it is necessary to join efforts to share responsibility and act together by uniting all the stakeholders in order for this transition to be fair for all.
Енергийният преход е една от задължителните стъпки към постигане на климатична неутралност. Затова повишаване на енергийната ефективност е все по-широко използване на енергия именно от възобновяеми енергийни източници. Това е приоритет и за правителството. В дългосрочен план постигането на целите за повишаване на енергийната ефективност е стратегически свързано и с обновяване на сградния фонд, като приоритет ще се отдава на енергийната ефективност, използвана в съчетание с саниране на сградния фонд.
The energy transition is one of the mandatory steps to be taken in order to achieve climate neutrality. And that is why improving energy efficiency is a wider approach towards the use of energy from renewable sources. This is the priority of this government. In the long term, achieving the goals to improve the energy efficiency is strategically linked up with renovation of the housing fund. This is a priority which improves the energy efficiency in combination with using renewable energy sources.
През 2021 година Министерски съвет прие дългосрочна национална стратегия за подпомагане обновяването на сградния фонд с хоризонт до 2050 година, като основна финансова схема в подкрепа на стратегията е предвидено създаването на единен фонд за декарбонизация, финансиран със средства от Европейския кохезионен фонд. Фондът ще се състои от 3 отделни подфонда според вида на крайните бенефициенти, а именно публичен сектор, търговски дружества и жилищни сгради.
In 2021, the Council of Ministers adopted a long-term national strategy in support of the refurbishment of the housing fund, and the horizon is 2050. The financial scheme that is going to be used in support of the strategy stipulates that there would be a single fund for decarbonization. It will be funded through the EU cohesion funds, and this fund will have 3 separate sub-funds, depending on the type of beneficiaries, namely public sector, businesses, and residential buildings.
Същевременно и енергийната трансформация и зеления преход трябва да се разглеждат не само като предизвикателства, но и като реална възможност за икономически растеж. Това е едно начало на един процес на пълна трансформация, който ще има съществен принос към възстановяване на потенциала за растеж на икономиката.
At the same time, energy transformation and the green transition should be seen not only as challenges, but also a realistic opportunity for economic growth. And this is only the beginning of a process of full transformation. It will be a significant contribution towards the potential of growth.
Другия важен инструмент в подкрепа на прехода към зелена икономика е плана за възстановяване и устойчивост, който е новата пътна карта за декарбонизация на българската индустрия за развитие и растеж на икономиката като част от устойчива и съхранена среда.
Another important tool in support of the transition towards a greener economy is the Recovery and Resilience Plan. It is the new roadmap towards decarbonization of the Bulgarian industry and the development and economic growth, which is a sustainable part of protecting the environment.
Инвестициите в плана са насочени към зелен и цифров преход за укрепване на икономиката и социалната устойчивост. Иновативни решения включват възобновяеми енергийни източници със съоръжения за съхраняване на енергия, пилотна геотермална централа за производство на топлинна и електрическа енергия, цифровизация и електрификация на транспорта.
The investment under the plan are targeting a green and digital transition. This will strengthen the economy and the social resilience. The innovative solutions include using renewable energy sources, the energy conservation tools, and a pilot geothermal heat and power generating plant, as well as digitalization and electrification of transport.
Предвижда се и схема за подпомагане на пилотни проекти за производство на зелен водород и биогаз, като основната цел на мярката е предоставяне на подкрепа за разработване на пилотни проекти, позволяващи въвеждане на зелен водород и биогаз, приложение в индустриалното производство, както и с цел за бъдещето им използване в транспорта и за производство на електрическа и топлинна енергия.
There is also a scheme in support of pilot projects for using green hydrogen and biogas. The main target of this measure is allowing support for developing pilot projects which make it possible to introduce the green hydrogen and biogas in industrial production, as well as the future use of this type of energy and transport and electricity and heat generation.
В плана за възстановяване и устойчивост на Република България е предвидена и реформа за създаване на териториални информационни звена във всички 28 области на територията на страната за обслужване на граждани и бизнеса.
The Recovery and Resilience Plan of the Republic of Bulgaria also stipulates a reform in setting up territorial information units. They would exist in all 28 districts in this country and provide services to citizens and business.
Като важен аспект от цялостната политика на страната ни за повишаване на енергийната ефективност е промяната и поведението на гражданите и индустрията и насочване на избора им към по-благоприятни енергийно ефективни резултати, чрез предоставяне на благоприятна среда и на актуална и достъпна информация за провеждане на консултации.
An important aspect of the overall policies of this country to improve energy efficiency is the change in the behavior of citizens and industry. Their choice should be channeled into more favorable actions to improve their energy efficiency by creating a conducive environment which would allow current and accessible information to be used and allowing the possibilities for consultations.
Още веднъж искам да благодаря за поканата. Пожелавам ползотворна дискусия и благодаря за вниманието.
Once again, thank you for the invitation. I wish you a fruitful discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for joining us today and for your support. Now the floor is yours, Rob. I would like to invite His Excellency, Dr. Rob Dixon, His Majesty's Ambassador to Bulgaria.
Thank you very much, dear Deputy Minister Koleva, ladies and gentlemen, уважаеми дами и господа. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today at this really important and timely event. Welcome to all of you in the room. Welcome to those of you who are joining online. My thanks also to our friends and partners at the BBBA for running the second one of these conferences, as well as to the exceptional support from Baringa and indeed Kapital. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm really delighted to be here for this conference focused on energy and energy efficiency. And I would absolutely associate myself with the words of the Deputy Minister that there is both challenge but also opportunity in this debate. And I think it's really important that today we are bringing together the business community, policy makers, activists, and those who are championing change to focus in on this, because yes, there is challenge, but there is opportunity, and there is business opportunity in this transition. And I'm really pleased and hope that UK companies here in Bulgaria can be part of that change. This event took place last year for the first time at exactly the same time as the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, when world leaders met to discuss how to tackle that urgent threat of global climate change. COP26 has moved to COP27, it will soon move to COP28 and indeed beyond. But the urgency, despite the annual cycle of global conferences on this, the urgency of this debate, the urgency of tackling climate change is not going away. The Glasgow Climate Pact that was adopted last year at COP26 was designed to cut emissions in this really decisive decade and keep the goal of capping global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees, to keep 1.5 alive, all with the aim of protecting the most vulnerable from the worst impacts of climate change. Now, real progress has been made over the course of the last 12 months. Progress was made in Glasgow and indeed in Sharm el-Sheikh recently. But the evidence and the science continues to show that there is so much more to do. That's why decisions that were taken at COP27, COP28 and COP29, as they inevitably come, are so important, and why it is that we as governments, as businesses and as citizens must continue to take action on all of these. For our part, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has vowed that the UK will continue to lead the global fight to deliver net zero, because this is the way to ensure the security and prosperity of our country and for generations to come. And I think those are words that apply globally. The second point that I'd perhaps like to make today, as we engage in this debate about energy transition, energy security, and indeed energy efficiency, is one about security. And it's about security conceived in the largest possible terms. The war in Ukraine, alongside the dreadful human consequences involved, has shown once again that energy diversification and adaptation are not only vital for the planet's survival and that goal of keeping 1.5 alive, but also vital for our collective national security. both here and now. This is not a long-term or academic debate. This is about real people in real places facing rising costs. Businesses and consumers alike here in Bulgaria and right around the world have seen rapidly rising inflation, soaring prices for electricity, gas. One potential response to that is to say that the green transition, the energy transition, is no longer relevant, that it's no longer a priority, that it can be put on further back on the list of those priorities. Another way to conceive this is to say that it is precisely because of the war in Ukraine that energy security and energy transition are even more vital for our collective security as well as prosperity, both now and in the longer term. And it is the war in Ukraine that has created a strong sense, I think here and indeed around the world, of both security and economic impetus for diversification of our energy mix, diversification away from reliance on Russian hydrocarbons. The Greece-Bulgaria interconnector that was finally opened recently has the potential to deliver real alternatives here in Bulgaria, delivering azeri gas and liquid natural gas. And that's a really important moment. But this debate about security is also triggering real steps in the adaptation of countries, including Bulgaria's energy mix, towards reducing dependence upon Russian hydrocarbons, towards reducing dependence upon Russian civil nuclear technology. And I welcome this, whether that's at Kozloduy through growing interest in hydrogen, in solar, or the latest nuclear technologies such as small nuclear reactors, where the UK has a particular set of expertise. And here it is where we see, as the UK and the UK business community, real potential to support Bulgaria's energy transition, to support that drive away from dependence upon hydrocarbons and to support that drive away from reliance on one particular source. And indeed, to support the country's ambition for a data-driven economy, which requires stable supply of energy, whether that is through cheaper, clean nuclear reactors, such as Rolls-Royce's small modular reactor program, which offers really cost-effective nuclear alternatives for electric generation, or whether it's through nuclear and solar, which holds broader potential around hydrogen production for transport and for industry. And these are really innovative, interesting and creative solutions where we believe the UK has a special role potentially to play. The third thing I would say is the role of innovation in all of this. This is why, given this mix of challenges and opportunities, we're working with the Bulgarian government as the UK government to share our good practice from the lessons and the mistakes that we have made in creating the legal and regulatory frameworks that need to underpin the energy transition. How you create favourable financial frameworks, including, for instance, for offshore wind. The UK, with its shallow seabed and high winds, sometimes a bit too high, has become a world leader in offshore wind. And wind power now in the UK generates over 25% of our electricity needs. And we're very keen to share that expertise and that practice about how you create a market, how you create the incentives to bring business to the marketplace to offer attractive solutions. What does all this mean for business? Businesses, in short, both large and small, across all sectors of the economy, are going to have and already have a crucial role to play in reducing their own environmental impact, improving energy efficiency, as well as developing and deploying the technological solutions that are going to be needed for the green transition. These ideas, the innovation, the creative spark will come from business and are already coming from business because business sees a business opportunity. And that is the really exciting part, I think, of this conversation. So we will hear from a number of these businesses today. But it is clear, as I say, that it is business that is driving that innovation. The introduction of clean, affordable solutions, supporting that wider energy transition. And I'm sure we will also hear today, as we have already from the Deputy Minister, about how companies operating here in Bulgaria are able to tap into the funds that are available as part of the transition plan, as part of the recovery and resilience plan, to help companies increase energy efficiency and deploy renewable energy solutions and deploy innovative solutions to that transition. In short, investing in the green transition makes economic sense. It makes sense for us ecologically, it makes sense for us in terms of our security, but there is a business rationale as to why this makes sense as well. So I'd like to end by saying thank you to the BBBA for organising this event. I think it is the bringing together of business and with that need to find those innovative solutions that we will find some really creative opportunities and some interesting opportunities to help us all move forward. So thank you ever so much. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your speech and also for your support to you and your team. And now, last but not least, I would like to invite for a welcome note Martin Smith, who is a partner at Baringa and also a board member of the British Bulgarian Business Association and an initiator of the BBBA Green Committee. So a very important person for us and for this conference. Martin, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all. I'm aware I'm the fourth welcome speech, and the real content is coming up. We have Pavlos and the keynotes, who I'm sure we're all looking forward to. But Your Excellency, Mrs. Koleva, board members and guests, I'd just like to welcome you on behalf of Baringa. We're delighted to be the sponsor of this event for the second year. As well as being a partner for Baringa, I'm responsible for Baringa's Bulgarian operations, and I've been working here for 10 years almost now. It's almost 10 years to the day when we first drafted the business plan to build a business in Bulgaria. And now Baringa support all operations and all industry sectors. But we're particularly strong, and we're a market leader in the UK in the energy sector and across worldwide. And we have a team within our Bulgaria operations that focus on sustainability, climate risk, consulting, and I think we are particularly well positioned to support the region, which we're very keen to do, and we're delighted to sponsor this event. The agenda last year felt important. You know, for those who attended, we had socially distanced seating. We had COVID testing. There was a sense of optimism as we were coming out of a global pandemic. If you recall, and I just wonder how many of us predicted the 12 months that we've just gone through, and the events, the political and the economic events that we've experienced and continue to experience. And it just feels like it's made the agenda even more important, in particularly the energy agenda, both the energy efficiency and the sustainable energy production agenda. So I'm delighted that with the focus of this event. As I've worked between the two countries for the last 10 years, it's very clear to me the potential for business collaboration. I see the expertise that the UK has developed in sustainable energy and wind energy. I see the innovation and the energy and the potential and the capability in Bulgaria, and the talent that's available and that we love to work with. I think the opportunity to bring that innovation and that specialism of the two countries together, the potential there is great. You know, it's natural for us to support this event. I hope ideas can be shared today. I hope we can bring together some innovative thinking. I hope we can spark some thoughts in your mind. I hope you leave here feeling like you've taken one or two ideas away. So once again, I'd like to thank you. I'm delighted to see you all here. I hope you find something interesting to take away, and I hope you enjoy the agenda and have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. for your welcome note. And now it is time for our keynote presentation. But before we move to it, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Pavlos Trichakis. He will be joining us online. Hello, good morning, Pavlos. You're joining us
good morning,
online.
Everyone.
Hi, from the UK. So Pavlos is a Baringa partner and expert in Southern European energy markets. From a young age, Pavlos saw climate change as the greatest challenge facing our generation. He moved from his native Greece to the UK when he was 18 to pursue degrees in electrical engineering and sustainable energy systems. After completing a PhD in smart grids, where he explored how to integrate renewables into the electricity grid, he's built a career advising clients on strategic and commercial issues around the energy transition in Southern Europe. Pavlos is proud to have joined Baringa as an analyst and worked his way up to becoming a partner. Initially, he focused on energy policy and regulation for public sector clients. Nowadays, you'll find him working on high-profile transactions in Southern European energy markets. He is expanding his focus from renewable energy into other green technologies like hydrogen, battery storage, as well as electric vehicles and their charging infrastructure. And an interesting fact about Pavlos, he is a big basketball fan and supports the Greek national team and the Milwaukee Bucks in the National Basketball Association. Without further ado, Pavlos, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone from London. And let me start by saying how sorry I am that unfortunately I can't make it to Sofia this morning. I was originally scheduled to be physically present with you all, but inspired by the events of the World Cup, I decided to play a football game on Sunday, and now I'm left sitting on this couch with a swollen knee and pretty much unable to walk. So unfortunately, I will have to postpone my visit, hopefully to next year's event, to build back on the excellent success from last year's event and no doubt this year's event. Just to add to what Martin mentioned about Baringa, we now have a total of around 1,600 consultants globally, including close to 120 consultants here in Bulgaria, supporting our UK and European clients on a range of transformation and delivery projects in both energy and non-energy related engagements. Specifically in the energy sector, Sofia is now our Southeastern European hub, and we're very excited that we're continuing to build a team there with a particular focus on market fundamentals and also delivering energy trading and risk management systems and other capability programs for our clients in the region. Being originally from Thessaloniki, only 300 kilometers down the road from Sofia, I take particular interest in market and policy developments in the Southeastern European energy sector, which is going to be the topic of today's presentation. If we move to the first slide, please. I think that the first slide shows what everyone in the room already knows, which is that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has changed the European energy sector probably forever, and this has profound implications both in the near term and in the long term. The three charts on the bottom there show historical gas flows from Russia into Europe, and they compare that picture over the period 2019-2021 compared to the gas imports that have been observed to date in 2022. The wider context here is that over the past couple of decades, in Europe, we have been building an energy system that has been used to import approximately 150 BCM of natural gas from Russia, as you can see on the bottom left, against a total European natural gas demand of about 500 BCM. So historically, about a third of the gas that we have been consuming in Europe was imported from Russia. We will now have to get used to significantly lower levels of Russian gas imports, probably forever. To date, as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, Russian gas imports are almost half compared to 2021. However, that is slightly misleading because for the first few months of the year, we were still importing considerable volumes of gas from Russia, as you can see in the chart in the bottom middle there. In fact, for the past few weeks, gas imports from Russia are approximately just 20%, 1/5, of what they would be expected for this time of the year. This is because out of the 4 main routes of Russian gas into Europe, 2 of them, Nord Stream and Yamal, have now stopped completely, with only Turk Stream operating at expected capacity and some transit gas also continuing to be imported from Ukraine. So as a result of this shock to the energy system, we have seen gas and electricity prices spiking since February, with gas supply sourcing becoming a substantial political and policy challenge for all European governments. The policy response so far, both in the UK and in the EU, has focused on four main things. Firstly, to accelerate the energy transition, with the landmark REPowerEU package in particular introduced in the EU. Secondly, to provide financial support to consumers, an important element of which is now to also reduce windfall profits for producers. And we're, I think, increasingly reading in the newspapers about some of the intervention measures that have been introduced, including some measures in the UK recently. Thirdly, demand reduction plans for natural gas consumers, and to a lesser extent so far, demand reduction plans for electricity consumers, with the European Commission, for example, now talking about 15% voluntary demand reduction measures that will have to be potentially implemented by member states. And fourthly, diversifying their gas supplies, mainly through increasing LNG imports. The resultant impact on the European economy from all this, I think it's quite uncertain at this stage. At Baringa, we have looked at preliminary data for October and November, the past couple of months, which suggests that EU gas demand for these past 2 months has actually been reduced by a little over 20% below the 5-year average. And that's mainly coming from demand reduction in the industry. Whilst at the same time, and based on the data from these 2 months only, industrial production has not actually substantially declined yet. So that fact, combined with the fact that gas storage facilities, are at more than 90% of their capacity today, can provide some optimism that we're entering this winter from a relatively stable position. However, all of this uncertainty on business investment, consumer spending is unknown. In the autumn 2022 forecast, for example, you may have seen that the European Commission now expects an overall reduction in GDP in Q4 this year and Q1 next year, which technically will mean a recession if it was to take place, with some economic growth to return in spring next year, but with relatively low GDP growth overall in 2023 and higher growth thereafter. In the next few slides, we will describe the key factors that will determine the supply and demand balance in the European natural gas market over the next 2 or 3 years. And in particular, the key question, are we going to have enough gas to meet demand, which is what's worrying European businesses and households at the moment. If we move to the next slide, please. This slide shows you the high-level overview of the expected natural gas supply in Europe for 2022. For this year, it's likely that total gas demand will be around 420 BCM against historical demand levels, as I mentioned, of around 500 BCM. So probably for the year overall, we'll have about a 15% lower natural gas demand. This will depend also a little bit on the weather in December. And I think there's 3 key messages that stand out from this slide. Firstly, that for this year, we expect pipeline imports from Russia to decline probably by around 70% compared to the recent years. And we will now have a system where Russia's share of pipeline imports into Europe will be equivalent to Algeria's. I think that's something that would have been completely unthinkable a year ago. There is a significant increase in LNG imports, mainly from the US, and also a significant increase in pipeline imports from Norway, but there is a limit now to how much we can increase Norwegian pipeline imports further. So most of the increase will now have to come from LNG. And then finally, we're continuing to see a decline in domestic production in Europe, particularly in the Netherlands and the UK. And unfortunately, that is a trend that we expect will continue to take place. If we move to the next slide, against this challenging backdrop, it is entirely possible that over the next couple of years, the gas supply and demand balance in Europe may now be tipped over by higher demand relative to the supply that we can secure. As a reminder on demand, you can see on the left-hand side there, natural gas demand in Europe is mainly coming from three sources. Firstly, electricity and heat generation. Secondly, demand from households. And thirdly, demand from industrial customers. So those three pillars are where most of the natural gas demand is coming from. But there is also some additional gas demand from other sectors, particularly commercial and public services. So I think the key message here is that if we do observe supply shortages and demand is maintained at high levels in Europe, for example, because we experience very cold weather, then unfortunately demand destruction will be required to maintain supply-demand balance, but also to ensure that gas storage levels remain at their minimum expected levels. And we now have a clear pathway from the European Commission on the targets that they expect to see for gas storage, including a target of about 90% by the 1st of November next year, and the minimum target by the end of this year of 85%, which it looks like will be met comfortably in Europe. If we move to the next slide, we present here three high-level scenarios that look at supply-demand balance in Europe, starting from what we call a best plausible scenario on the left-hand side, where all natural gas demand is met. However, for this scenario to materialize, you need to believe, firstly, that there continues to be high pipeline imports into Europe, including a partial return of Russian pipeline gas flows, which, however, may not be acceptable politically. Secondly, LNG imports will rise from today's levels, with LNG cargoes mainly flowing to Europe rather than Asia. And thirdly, European gas demand is kept at check by relatively mild weather and voluntary demand reduction measures, particularly at the industrial sector. In the most likely scenario, in the middle, we assume firstly that pipeline gas imports continue at current levels. Secondly, that there is strong competition between Europe and Asia for LNG, and so LNG imports are at comparable levels to today. And thirdly, that European demand declines only slightly, because on the one hand, there is somewhat lower industrial activity because the economy slows down, as we discussed earlier. But on the other hand, there is fewer incentives to cut demand because of the gas price caps that we expect are going to be implemented in the European Union, which somewhat curtails the economic signals for curtailing gas consumption. And finally, on the right-hand side, a worst-case scenario where Russian gas supply is completely shut off, LNG imports are lower, and European gas demand is also higher because of cold weather. Bringing these three scenarios together in the next slide, our analysis suggests that, starting on the left, in the best plausible scenario, all demand is met over the next 2 or 3 years. However, remember that this scenario is particularly optimistic about the levels of pipeline imports flowing into Europe. In the Baringa most likely scenario, we actually find that about 11% of European gas demand could be unmet. And that could be a considerable amount of demand destruction. But in our view, if it was to happen, it's unlikely to cause significant long-term economic damage. Finally, on the worst-case scenario, we find that as much as about a quarter of European natural gas demand could be unmet over the next 2 or 3 years, by which point it wouldn't just be the industrial sector that would be curtailed, but even sectors such as commercial and residential heating, with potentially significant implications for consumer welfare. So I think overall, this picture highlights the unprecedented uncertainty that exists with respect to our near-term supply and demand balance in the European energy sector, which is something that economic actors in Europe will have to get increasingly used to over the next 3 years. Our final slide looks at what this all means for Bulgarian energy policymakers, and in particular, what we think the near-term priorities for Bulgaria should be. Starting with renewables first, we would like, I think us and probably everyone in the room, would like to see faster deployment of renewables, not just in Bulgaria, but in neighboring markets as well. For Bulgaria, what we would like to see is an implementation of renewable auctions that we haven't seen in years now, which has been proven to work very successfully in other countries. We would also like to see lower barriers for long-term PPAs between consumers and producers. And we would also like to see taking advantage of the significant funding that is available at the European Union level. We would also like to see grid constraints and planning constraints being tackled. Grid in particular is really important and something that we're hearing all the time from investors that we work with. And another factor that we hear all the time is balancing costs. We do need to work together to fix the very high balancing costs that renewable generators are currently exposed to, and which from our discussions with investors is one of the biggest barriers in investment in renewables in Bulgaria today. Finally, as mentioned by the ambassador, we also think it is important to lay the foundations for the development of offshore wind farms in Bulgaria as well. For gas, we heard that the IGB interconnector launched operations in October, and this can bring significant diversification benefits as it brings gas from Azerbaijan, as well as potentially LNG from the Alexandroupoli LNG terminal, which should be ready by the end of next year. We also see that the Bulgaria-Serbia gas interconnector is scheduled to complete by end of next year as well. And what we expect to see is much greater cooperation at regional level to expand common LNG purchases, which will also help to reduce price for consumers. And in particular, we take note of the increased cooperation for the Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary vertical gas corridor to ensure diversification of supply and that gas can flow north-south or south-north as necessary. We also take note that a Bulgarian project of common interest is the Chiren underground gas storage facility, which is the only gas storage facility in Bulgaria, which could be expanded in order to provide additional flexibility to the whole region. And finally, as we discussed in the previous slide, we think that it is also very important to have a clear demand-side reduction plan in case supply deficits are observed. Particularly what we would envisage here is a merit order by which gas demand curtailments would take place depending on their socioeconomic impacts. Concerning lignite, it's clear that its role in the near term has strengthened given what's happening with natural gas. However, lignite is clearly incompatible with net zero, and so we will need a credible long-term conversion plan, particularly for the Maritsa Istok. For nuclear, I think there's two priorities. Firstly, in the near term, there is a need to diversify away from Russian fuel supply without, of course, jeopardizing security of supply. But in the long term, we would also need to see a strategic decision to be made with regards to the type of new build nuclear capacity that the country will need, including potentially small modular reactors that could have significant benefits from a modularity perspective, but their costs at this stage is unclear. We would also like to highlight the role of flexibility, which will be very important. And here we would like to see dedicated auction or a framework for new electricity storage capacity. We would also like to see a framework also for hydrogen production and usage. I think it's not just for Bulgaria, but for the EU as a whole, where we expect to see more movement by the end of this year. And finally, we would also like to see incentives for deploying heat pumps. Finally, for consumers and energy markets, starting with consumers first, we would like to continue to see financial assistance being provided to supporting businesses and vulnerable households. And here, we would also like to suggest potentially tax incentives to encourage energy efficiency. I'm also keen to hear what other panelists think about energy efficiency. Since last week, we've also seen that Bulgaria is now successfully integrated also in the European single intraday coupling mechanism, which is a great benefit from a flexibility perspective. However, we would now also like to see more intraday products being introduced, a more regulatory focus on increasing liquidity in intraday markets, which can help reduce balancing costs for renewable producers as well. And then finally, we would also like to see, or we also see significant benefits in increasing market integration with non-EU Western Balkan countries, both in terms of interconnection and market integration, and also improving liquidity in forward timeframes which can help both for PPAs and for hedging purposes. And we would like to see more emphasis being placed in that direction. This concludes my presentation for this morning. Thank you very much for your attention over the past 20 minutes or so, and please feel free to reach out to Martin and the Baringa team in the room if you have more questions about Baringa and the work that we do in this region.
Thank you very much, Pavlos, for a very detailed and in-depth analysis of the energy market in Bulgaria, in Europe, and globally. That's exactly what we needed, the forecast of what to expect in the upcoming winter, because this is a question that everybody is worried about. Now, if you allow me, I would like to open the floor for a few questions. Do you have any questions to Pavlos? Kindly introduce yourself.
Hi, Pavlos. I don't know if you can hear me, but this is Tim Weistray from the British Embassy. I just wanted to pick up on something you said at the beginning. You noted... Oh, okay. Thanks. You noted that the gas demand is down around 20%, I think, up until now, but the industrial production doesn't seem to have suffered to that extent. You know, it's largely held up. So I'm just interested in, you know, why you think that might be the case. Is it because of, you know, substitution from other fuels or electricity, or do you think companies have already started to make efficiencies? You know, observations on that will be welcome. Thanks.
It's a great question, and unfortunately we only have preliminary data at this stage, particularly from industrial powerhouses like Italy and Germany. It's a combination of the two things that you mentioned, we think. It's a combination of substitution, particularly from natural gas into electricity, and to some extent also energy efficiency measures. But I think it's a bit too early to say if that 20% is sort of the low-hanging fruit, if you like, and it was savings that could easily have been made, and whether there's more pain to come if we now have to cut gas demand even further from these levels. I think, unfortunately, we just don't have enough data at this point to say with any certainty what is the case. But I think it's mainly a combination of energy efficiency and substitution, particularly into electricity.
Thank you, Pavlos. We have one more question.
Good morning. My name is Dimitar Delchev. I'm a lawyer from Eurolex, Bulgaria. The Bulgarian Recovery and Resilience Plan envisages 1.4 gigawatts of renewable energy sources combined with 6 gigawatts of energy storage, which is great for Bulgarian business and for international business, because this means that procurements will be done for panels, for wind farms. It is great also for the business which wants to meet its own demand by producing its energy by its own. So the project sounds great. My question is in terms of technology, because I know that Baringa is a real experts in renewable energy sources. In terms of technology, there is a dispute in Bulgaria if batteries are the greatest way to balance the renewable energy sources. And there are suggestions for other technologies. The problem is that the Bulgarian Resilience Plan envisages specifically batteries, and if we begin to change this will lead to a great delay and actually to losing the opportunity. So can you comment a little bit on that? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the question. So we think that batteries have a very important role to play, but it is important to understand the limitations of batteries and also their strengths. Their strengths is that, as you mentioned, they can be deployed quickly, and also they can be used to solve network constraints. So you can, for example, collocate a battery together with renewables in parts of the grid that is weak, and that allows you to deploy renewables faster compared to without batteries. So they're modular, they're quick to deploy, but on the other hand, the storage duration of a battery is typically between 2, maybe up to 6 hours or so. You know, that's the amount of storage that you typically have with a battery storage solution. If we're talking about net zero, and if we're talking about a system that mainly runs on renewable energy, you may have seen that this week, for example, we have experienced what the Germans call Dunkelflaute, which is basically a prolonged period with very low wind and very low solar. And the analysis we've done at Baringa suggests that you could easily have a period of as much as 2, perhaps as many as 3 weeks of very little renewables throughout the whole of Europe. Now, if that's the case, having a battery storage with just 6 hours of storage is not going to help you very much. So you will need what's known as long duration storage as well, when you reach that level of renewable penetration and when you build a system that is largely used to running at renewable sources. Pump storage is also great, but again, pump storage typically gives you about 10 hours of storage or so. So that on its own is also not going to be enough either. So then you're talking about potential solution like hydrogen, thermal air storage, or kind of long duration storage solutions. So I think my answer would be that we need to look at the benefits and the disbenefits of all storage technologies, and we will probably meet a combination of those as we get closer and closer to net zero. But in the near term, I think batteries are the quickest to deploy, and so practically speaking, we would expect to see a considerable amount of batteries on the system soon.
Thank you, Pavlos. One more short question before we move on.
Thank you very much. Hello, Pavlos. This is Maria Trifonova. I'm with two heads, Sofia University and the Center for the Study of Democracy. You mentioned offshore wind, which we think is very much underestimated, the potential of offshore wind in the Black Sea region. And this is the topic I'm working on for the last couple of years. However, some first steps for enabling the legislative framework for offshore wind are already in place in the country. According to our estimates, 2 gigawatt of offshore wind capacity in the Black Sea could contribute to the energy production with, let's say, 7 terawatt hour per year, and this has this could have a contribution also to the energy system if we assume that there will be contract for difference for this electricity, approximately about €500,000 paybacks based on the contract for difference. I'm wondering if there's some calculation already made by Baringa, what the offshore wind energy sector has contributed or paid back based on contract for difference for the last year in the periods of very high energy prices in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question, and we have read with a lot of interest your report on the potential of offshore wind in the Black Sea and in Bulgaria specifically. So we have not performed this calculation because what we find very difficult is what the strike price will be. I know there have been some indicative numbers being mentioned, both for fixed as well as floating offshore wind. But unfortunately, there are no projects under development today in Bulgaria. We would like to see projects under development, but the reality today is that there are no projects under development. So we find it very difficult to estimate what the cost for these projects would look like. And for that reason, we haven't done those calculations. Do we think that offshore wind has a role to play to 2050? Yes, we do, especially if Bulgaria, is serious about net zero. We think that offshore wind has a role to play. But I think at this stage, it's too early to say what the cost would be and what the exact technology will be and what those projects will look like.
Thank you very much, Pavlos, for the presentation and also for taking questions. We wish you fast recovery, and we're looking forward to welcoming you to Bulgaria real soon. Now I would like to move on to our panel that presents BBBA members and their best practices in energy efficiency. The panel will be moderated by Julian Mihov, who is the chairman of the BBBA Trade Committee and also Business Development Director for Southeast Europe for PwC. He has 20 years of experience as a law and tax consultant to international investors and big local companies from different industries in Bulgaria and other countries in the SEE. I will like Julian to introduce his panelists. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I just want to start probably building up on what Pavlos said. First of all, I want to promise Pavlos I'll give him another good reason to come to Bulgaria, because I'm working on arranging the coach of the national Greek basketball team, Dimitris Itoudis, to be in Bulgaria. because he will be a guest of a big sport business conference which PwC is organizing, so not a good reason. And secondly, as you well know, PwC organized the first ESG awards, which we awarded some of the leading companies in Bulgaria last month. So I would really love to see more people from Baringa sharing their experience at the next conference, because we'll continue on with ESG awards, and that's an opportunity to invite every one of you to join the next year edition. There are no small and big companies. There are no completed and pending projects. Everyone that really lives with the ESG agenda would be welcome on that, and that's partly the reason why I gladly accepted the invitation of BBBA to chair this panel, where we have really very nice speakers with a lot of success stories to share. And I'll start first with introducing the panelists. On my left-hand side, we have Madlena Vladimirova, who is the CEO of Vladimirova Consulting Limited. Quite long experience on green business, innovative technologies and know-how internationally. Madlena is representing, in fact, she's a deputy chair of the Norwegian Bulgarian Business Group, and has a lot of experience to share with us about how the Nordic countries are actually working on energy efficiency, and in particular how her company is supporting geothermal power and sustainability. Next to Madlena is another long-term expert, Maya Atanasova, with a very interesting story of actually putting together the resources we know are available on the market, but we can't actually get access to them. Her company, Atamiq Limited, is building now a very interesting platform where they're both digitalizing the sources that we need for any environmental projects, but also where all environmental experts could be sitting together, and whenever you need one, you can just go to the platform and get in contact with the right expert that you need. Douglas Blackwell represents the UK business in Bulgaria with a very interesting story. Douglas is a co-founder and business development officer for Crowdhouse Energy, a UK-based SME specialized in urban megawatt scale bifacial PV solutions. That sounds very difficult to pronounce, but he would explain in more details really how important it is nowadays. And then on my right-hand side, two gentlemen who talk about electricity efficiency and sustainability in the real estate sector, simply because Alex Dorr is probably most of you know, managing partner, HGR Architects and master planners and board member of the Bulgarian Green Building Council. So person who's designing our greenhouses, green offices, and some success stories to share, and also Ivan Armianov, actually the person whom we need to thank when we have clear air, good cooling and heating in our offices, industrial buildings. Both of them, Ivan is representing one of the leading companies on the Bulgarian market and also internationally, Tangra AV, a family-owned business, by the way, which is important to mention because families help bring values, who would share both his Bulgarian but also international experience on how they're succeeding. So starting with the ladies first. Maya, question to you. Maybe you can tell us more about how you came with this idea of digitalizing the supply chain process, why you think it's needed, and what your long-term experience, more than 20 years on the market, really showed you that is required, particularly in the area of environmental protection, energy efficiency, energy supply.
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, to the BBBA for the chance to be here and to participate in this event. Good morning again to everybody. So, right, I have even more than 25 years of experience, again, family business. My father established it many years ago. So all my professional life is connected with the industrial business, with the B2B sales, particularly engineering projects connected with the environmental issues. So I know very well the clients, I know very well their expectations, what they need, from what they suffer. So when I have a plan, when I have put a goals for the sustainability, for the reaching of some environmental goals, improving efficiency, so on, that's very nice. But then we have to execute it. Then we have to start with this idea to be done, to be executed. So we found a big gap in two directions. One is information about not only the technologies. There are a lot of sources, but with our platform Atamiq, we wanted to put in one place available technologies, available products with very detailed information, with a delivery time, roughly delivery time when it comes to the complicated equipment, with the prices, the budget prices, in order to keep our clients informed what they can expect and what their budgets looks like. And the second direction, which now we are developing, is the natural step. It came after the product development of the platform, when we see that it's a very big shortage of experts, of consultants, of installers of equipment, of engineers. So we actually put at one place all the people, all the network what we have during this long period of works, and we invite them, and we want to make the connection between them and connection with the clients easier, faster, open, and in that way we think we help our clients, our customers, to reach their environmental goals faster, in a friendly environmental, open, and hopefully in the economically safety way. So this is Atamiq.
Well, that sounds great. By the way, we need a couple of experts right now for our project. So definitely we can discuss after the conference how we can partner this one.
Thank you.
Madlena, you have a lot of experience on the Nordic countries and how they deal with the energy supplies and sustainability, utilizing all the natural resources. To what extent you believe that the experience you have gained in working on projects in Norway or even Iceland, which is probably a better example to share here, because they very much rely on geothermal power, and we know that Bulgaria has geothermal resources. So to what extent we can bring this experience to Bulgaria, because obviously the war in Ukraine would have an impact on the energy supply, and probably we have resources we're sitting on but we're not utilizing.
Exactly. Thank you very much for this question, and good morning from me to everybody as well, and thanks to BBA for the organization of this conference and for the invitation. Actually, exactly the shortage of supply of energy sources currently we are all aware about, and the international situation made us think in this direction and share best practices and experience from the Nordic countries. So our experience mainly is with Norway in terms of sorting, recycling, waste management. But then we decided with our local Bulgarian partners and industries, seeing that they are mostly more and more asking themselves, okay, perfect, we'll implement the best practices from Norway and from Scandinavia in general in terms of waste management, but what about the energy? What about the sources we are using? Could we have also a kind of a closed loop or optimal solutions? And then we decided to look into Iceland for best practices, because Julian, you are very relevantly mentioning that we have all heard in Bulgaria we are the second country in Europe in terms of geothermal or geothermal potential, and I have tried to check it, cross-check it with several sources, and it appears that we are really sitting on something we are not exploiting properly. So our decision to look into the Iceland's example really appeared to be a great chance maybe for Bulgaria to see the possibilities. And actually we are in the very beginning of this feasibility study, but I decided to share the experience gained so far, and hopefully later in the year or even during the next conference, hopefully next year, we will be able to share the results. So what I was very much impressed by, or it's a funny fact about Iceland, that when a space gets too warm, an Icelander opens the window rather than switching off the electricity or air conditions. So the point now is to see not only knowing Iceland had great examples, not only knowing Bulgaria has great potential, but to see if Iceland could be an example for the world and particularly for Bulgaria with tailor-made solutions. And when I'm talking about tailor-made solutions, I'm talking for technologies, but also for licensing, for a regulatory and legal framework, and finally for a business plan or a master plan showing the costs and benefits. Maybe I stop here now, and later on I can share some of the examples we have come so far in investigating the best practices from the Icelandic geothermal market.
Well, thank you very much, and hopefully another Bulgarian Blue Lagoon will pop up again in the media soon.
Yeah, exactly. The Blue Lagoon is a great example.
For good or for bad, we'll be making bridges to the war in Ukraine, and obviously geopolitics would have a big impact on energy. And my next question is to Douglas, because your company is working on two very important areas. One of them is the energy security and the energy resilience. So can you share with us the experience you have so far dealing with such an important issue, particularly addressing the urban energy? Because again, similar to the geothermal power, I think that Bulgaria is an excellent example on how we are wasting our resources or how we are not utilizing the resources we have.
Okay, Excellency, Lady Minister, Mr. Chairman, and everybody, thank you very much for attending and taking interest in this really important topic. And of course, it takes entrepreneurs sometimes to actually look around and create something, and specifically in energy and energy efficiency. So we, as a small family-based SME in Newcastle, and Newcastle, if anybody is interested, is the northernmost city in England. So we have a lot of engineering experience. It's naturally been that way for hundreds of years. Now, what we decided to do as a business was to actually look at what everybody is doing in terms of the PV sector. So what we actually get is we get monofacial PV cells mounted on roofs or in fields as solar farms. And we thought, well, look, you know, if you're going to make a really innovative business, you need to look outside of the box. And we looked outside that box and we said, what we have to do is bring megawatt scale power into the cities, not having it sitting outside. And we put everything together and we looked around, where possibly could we do this in a built-up urban environment? And strangely enough, I was at Bluewater in Kent, which is a massive shopping centre. Really good, it's like what we've got here, to be honest. And the car park was so big. It was really a huge-sized car park. 800 bays in just one side, the area I was actually in. And we thought, well, look, you know, this is where our platform is, because we've got everything is flat and level and it's already been developed. So if we can put the power, the PV, above where the cars are parked, we're not creating any further environmental impacts or loss of diversity, and that's a very important factor. And we spent 2 years designing a system called Helios Volt, and we initially looked at doing it in terms of what everybody else was using, which were monofacial panels. And a monofacial panel is, everybody's seen a PV panel, flat collector plate, lots of PV cells, sun comes down, collects the energy and generates the energy and sends it out to where it's needed. Now, bifacial PV, in actual fact, has a collector on the top in the normal fashion, but on the reverse it has another set of cells. And these reverse cells can actually collect up to 22.5% more energy. Now, making a business case, because that's what we look at, is going to a client and saying, look, we've got a great business case for you here. And that 22% actually made it up to a 6-year payback. Now, add these ridiculous energy increases, the escalation of energy, our paybacks are now at 1.9 to 2.5 years. So where's business? Why isn't business adopting this strategy? Don't wait for your government to tell you to do it. Pick it up yourself and do it. And it quite made me laugh, because I stood here last year and made a small presentation over here telling everybody about our bifacial PV canopies. Now, our dear friends in France legislators have made it a legal requirement that by 2025 you have to have, in a car park with over 80 car parking spaces, by canopies, PV canopies. And I quite had to chuckle at it, because they're still doing it wrong. I've been to France. I've been to France a number of times and looked at the way they do it. They have beautiful artistic canopies. And what they do is they plonk on the top of the canopy, the steel structure, a trapezoidal panel. And that trapezoidal panel is then fitted with a monofacial PV panel. Now, big issue is this. That monofacial PV panel, because it's close fitted to a trapezoidal fabric, means that when it gets really hot, it overheats and it slows down the panel, so the efficiency falls away. Now, if they had come to us, we would have put them quite right immediately. And Geordies do have a good sense of engineering. So when we designed, we thought, well, let's do something totally different here. Let's look at build it in the factory and bring it to site. You know, modern construction methods. And we looked at how best to do this, and we designed a cassette frame which holds 4 panels. And those panels are already pre-wired, and when we bring it to site, all we do is fit it on top of the purlins of the canopy, but they are pure bifacial, because there's no shading on the panel below. And this is very important, because to gather that 22.5% more energy, there is an effect called the albedo effect. And what in actual fact is, the sun light comes down, it hits the first piece of energy, and then other frequencies of radiation come through the panel, and they may hit a car below or the ground or anything that's there. So anything that's scattered or reflective then comes back up through the panel, and that's where we hit the sweet spot, the 22.5% more energy. So if our dear friends in France had even thought about that, then they would be on a winner, because they also identified 11 gigawatt of power, obviously not energy, because their energy is going to be a lot lower than ours. However, they do have a better irradiance value in France than we do have in the north of England. Excuse me, one moment. I just have a... And here in Bulgaria, it's even better. I ran some numbers on Bulgaria, and it's outstanding for bifacial solar. It really, really is. So we've got an amazing opportunity. Now, where we are in Newcastle, we, in September, had our patent for Helios-Fold accepted by the UK Patent Office. So that allowed us now to go out and look seriously without fear of somebody copying it and taking the idea on, because we do want to make this successful, but we want to make it successful not for investors of energy companies, utilities. We want to make it an investment for businesses, so businesses take control of what they pay, because the life expectancy of our system is 30 years. And we can fix that price, or we don't fix it, but the sun fixes it, and so does the business owner. He's fixing his energy price. Now, if I said to all of you people here running businesses, come with me, I'll fix your energy price for 30 years at, sorry, I'm talking English now, 10 pence per kilowatt hour, you'd snap my hand off. And you'd say, right, okay, now we can afford to invest further and build our business better. But the other thing is, it bounces up in true ESG fashion in terms of more employment, better wages for staff. And these are all the very, very important things that we really need to do. So I just hope that people or businessmen out there who are looking at new businesses take all of these things into consideration. Now, for us, now I've got to talk a little bit later because I've got a little thing here where Julian's going to ask us about our next plan, and Bulgaria features in it big time, because Bulgaria sits in a fantastic location, and we know we can help rebuild Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and it's all about helping each other. Even though we're not in Europe, we're still friends, we're still partners.
Thank you very much, Douglas. I think actually your first partners are sitting right here next to me. So two people from the real estate.
I know, yeah.
And that's very naturally want to pass the word now to Alex and Ivan. You're both coming in different aspects of the real estate industry, and maybe you can share with us what currently are the issues that you see that both the real estate and the construction business are facing, and how they respond to the ESG requirements, because you have to design it, you have to build it. Okay.
Yeah, go first.
It's a big question, actually. I mean, I think sustainability in design and architecture has, been prevalent for probably, I'd say, the past 10 years. And I think it's been on a journey where up until 2 or 3 years ago, we were completely dependent on third-party certification methodologies, which we still are. I think things have changed massively in the past 2 years. I think we've seen, I was sitting in a conference in Belgrade actually, and for the first time I was sitting in a property conference where we had the first keynote speaker was someone who came directly from COP26 and gave a full breakdown of the impact of the built environment on the climate. And normally when we go to these things, there's a sort of spasmodic, sort of very gentle touch on, the environmental impact of the construction industry, but not much more. And for the first time, I was sitting in an event where you had joined up thinking between, the financiers, the environmentalists, and, the contractors and the investors themselves. And I think the question of whether or not we're heading in this direction now has been answered. I don't think there's any question. Whereas, even 4 or 5 years ago, I think there were people who were still skeptical. So we have moved very quickly into a different place, in our experience. In terms of ESG, environmental impacts from construction is huge. I mean, it's 50% of all carbon emissions. So that's a fairly well-known figure, but for those of you who don't know, so we have a massive responsibility. And when governments and legislators are looking at how to lower their carbon emissions and trying to achieve net zero, you know, obviously when it's 50%, it's a big, you know, that's a fairly obvious one to start trying to tackle, but it's also very complex. And, you know, as architects, you know, we generally are idealists. We do, we do try and, you know, persuade our clients to implement best practice. The challenges we face are, you know, usually market-driven, and the fact that, you know, governments are way behind on legislating solutions which actually force, you know, on any. That's not quite true. On energy efficiency, for the past 5 years, you've seen you know, step by step, you've seen buildings become more energy efficient through legislation. But, you know, the supply chain requirements in terms of, you know, the carbon footprint of how buildings, I mean, 10% of all carbon emissions are during construction, and then 30% or 40% of all carbon emissions are then buildings in use and other aspects. So there's still a lot to do, but at the same time, it's also very encouraging the amount of movement there is in the industry in that direction. In terms of Bulgaria, I think, you know, we've been working in Bulgaria now for 15 years as SGI. I think ever since we started from the very beginning, we were luckily, we come from a British practice background, and it was always been one of our sort of leading sectors really, has been sustainability in general. There's lots of other aspects apart from energy efficiency and sustainability in the built environment. I mean, ESG, the social aspect, you know, it's something which is often overlooked because the environmental part seems to be so important, but it is also very important as well. As a practice, and I think, you know, I can talk about our experience as a small company and what we've done personally. It's actually very easy to become ESG compliant if you're a small company. I think sometimes we look at it and it's like a very complicated thing, but it's not. And, you know, if you're a manufacturing industry or you're producing something, it does become more complex. But for a small company, you know, in Bulgaria, for us to become a zero carbon company, essentially it cost us about 2,000 euros. And it would be even cheaper if we had a choice of where we could buy our electricity from. So if we had a choice to buy renewable energy sources, it wouldn't even cost that. You know, there's very simple steps that you can do. And in fact, I think a lot of companies are doing a lot of ESG stuff already. They may not even realize they're doing it. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Alex and Ivan.
Good morning, everyone. I'll start with some historical part. Actually, this is not the first energy crisis the world and Europe is experiencing. If we get back from the energy crisis from the 70s, the construction business becoming more and more aware that we should build more energy-saving houses. So people like Alex already started introducing better solutions for energy saving, and our houses become thermos. Step by step, from single glazing, even in UK now, double glazing is standard. It was not 2 decades ago. But step by step, everyone is becoming more and more aware of energy saving. And nowadays, everyone is looking for ESG as a very popular term, but okay, we are living in these houses and we need to breathe air. This is vital for us. There are two researchers, one of Wittgenstein and Green from Germany, that from the all energy usage in one house, between 42 and 56% in Europe is the energy cost for heating, ventilation and air conditioning. This depends if the house or the public building is situated in North Europe or in south of Italy, for example. And also American study a year ago of the Center for Energy Efficiency and Sustainability in US, they found out that 40% of the carbon emissions worldwide are from public buildings. And 40% of these 40%, are a little bit more than 40%, I think, was from heating, ventilation and air conditioning. So if we would like to go for net zero, or at least for doing something better for the future generations, we should work on every aspect. So in terms of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, we have done a lot and we are promoting a lot, but now is the time to go harder and to educate more people, because of course we are working together with architects and engineers, but the investors and the homeowners and of course government and municipalities are not aware that they can save huge amount of money and help the future generations decreasing carbonization with indoor air quality, providing better indoor air quality. I can bet in this room we have less than 40% fresh air. That's why in 1 hour everyone will have headache and will be fed up of us. Of course, air conditioning and heating already a decade ago in Europe, a lot of companies that are let's say, well established and have a lot of knowledge in air conditioning and heating, they have started using different refrigerant gases, and they have developed chillers and heat pumps that can work at -10 ambient temperature and providing 70 degrees water, which means that it can substitute boilers of pellets or gas boilers, and it can provide radiator heating or underflow heating. And in the same time, this refrigerant is 672 times lower global warming potential than the standard one that everyone is using, R410. Of course, even a decade after they started, nowadays there are 4 or 5 European companies that are promoting this refrigerant gas. It's available on the market, it's free, but most of the people and most of the air conditioning companies are now producing in East Asia, and they are okay to produce with R410 or gases that are with higher global warming potential. This is the same situation like in US, they are still using R22. And last but not least, a lot of people started thinking and investing in smart control and smart management of the systems like BMS, like everyone is now having air conditioning at home and it can use it through his mobile phone. So it can decrease in the same time bills, but it can also provide better understanding and better, let's say, lower harming the environment.
Well, that's really interesting, because I just read yesterday that a Bulgarian company which is producing actually smart technology, particularly for the household, they made a hit on the Black Friday last week or 2 weeks ago, selling exactly smart devices. Believe it or not, 140 million sales throughout Western Europe. It sounds unbelievable. It is, because this is a listed company, so I don't believe they would lie. Because we're running out of time, I just have one final question, because I already heard so many business ideas that probably after the meeting I can help you sign the contract between yourself. But just really a couple of sentences from each one of you. What are your expectations for 2023? There are a lot of legislative changes and amendments coming in force. They have impact on each of your businesses. Douglas, I can already introduce you to people who would love to buy your technology. As a matter of fact, before the conference started, we spoke with Ivanov that recently their company signed a contract to change the air conditioning and heating system of 40 public schools in the Czech Republic. So I'm wondering why this is not possible in Bulgaria. Probably another waste of opportunities, as all these many we just mentioned. But a couple of sentences from each one of you. Doug, let's start with you.
Yeah, 2023 expectations, always high, as always.
Okay, let's be optimistic.
We were slow to start, waiting for our IPO to be granted. However, we have a £96 million pipeline on feasibility studies. This is in the UK. We have meetings confirmed in January with devolved Minister Julie James, who wants to apparently fill Wales with all of our urban solar. And high-level discussions also going on with ScotRail, who are taking a pilot next year, 2023, and if it's successful, they will roll it out in all of their train stations. Now, not forgetting, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, late 2024, early 2025, we want to roll out the same experience and the same methodology for production of heliospolt here in Bulgaria. For two reasons: fantastic young workforce, very well educated. Second reason is the opportunity to help out this poor grid and also try to get rid of the lignite thermal coal power. Having said that, I thought to myself the other day, current events, I'm so happy that Bulgaria's hung on to that, because if they had to shut them down, there would have been bad issues for the people living here. And that's me.
Thank you, Dag. That's really nice to hear some nice words about Bulgaria finally. Except for launching the platform, which everybody is looking at, what else would you say are your predictions for 2023 to come?
Generally, I'm positive because all of our business are connected with something very important, going green, being more safety, life safe even. So for me, I'm really positive. We have projects, as I said, this is the digital part of our business, but together with that, we have our main offline business, more or less. So we have a project in the Bulgarian nuclear power plant. We're working in a project in the hydro power plants. We have another replacing of heating system in the schools. So we're really busy in that business. And I'm positive. Okay, there will be maybe some drops and downs, but as the colleague said, it's a normal for those years who have seen so many things. So yes, we'll survive. I'm positive and we'll continue.
Madlena?
Okay, I'll share my expectations or my vision with an example from Iceland, and actually built upon what Ivan said, because in 1970s Iceland was really a poor country, and then also the energy crisis at that time came, and then the country saw that there is a security issue, and they decided that they should try to rely on internal sources so that they are less dependent on externalities. Then some fragmented efforts started from farmers in terms of using the geothermal energy, but then the municipalities were involved, then the state, then a fund was set apart to share the risk with the entrepreneurs. So my expectations are that during 2023 in Bulgaria there will be conditions that the legal and the regulatory framework is really improved in terms of introducing green energy, and also a foundation would be set for more innovations, and we will be able to transfer the best practices and the technologies result out of the study, which will be hopefully ready till summer. So I would expect that funds, that legal framework and that foundation for innovations will be at place so that we can introduce part of the best practices so far and use really all the applications, because geothermal energy, it is not only district heating and electricity, it is also agriculture, aquaculture, wellness and spa, which we already partially have, but many others as well, industry mainly, and cheap electricity with reduced carbon dioxide emissions. So I'm also optimistic and positive, looking forward.
Okay, gentlemen, now your predictions.
Predictions. I think it's probably not just 1 year, but 2 years, because things take so long. I think I'll talk from the point of view as an architect. I think what we're trying to find. I think the biggest challenge for us is when ESG at the moment, there's no classification system, so there's no way of actually certifying whether you're ESG compliant, really. It's just a question of, at the moment. So we're waiting to see what comes out of the EU this year. And the other thing is a tax on carbon in the construction industry, to see if that actually happens, and because that could be huge. And then there will have to be a lot of legislation following it in terms of how we construct buildings. And we hope that will happen. We'd like to see a lot more timber construction, embodied carbon construction, less use of concrete, but we will see.
Just to add to Alex, I think last week they have implemented some regulations in the EU, and they're expecting universal scoring system for ESG in the next month or two. Regarding the future, for sure we cannot talk about 1 year because everything in the construction business is with planet for about 5 years. Yeah. But of course we can be pessimists. The carbon emissions of the USA military forces are higher than Europe. No one in, let's say, rest of the world than Europe is thinking like us for energy efficiency, for decarbonization and so on. But for sure, here in Europe are becoming very good initiatives, and a lot of good things happen in the recent decades. We started with this project that you mentioned with the schools and public buildings in Portugal 2008. And then step by step, going a little bit eastern, Czech Republic, Poland, Romania even, we have done some hospitals for energy efficiency, and it was funded by the government. In Czech Republic, we received certificate from their government. And we are hoping and expecting, even the Norwegian fund had money last year for public buildings. Unfortunately, due to political situation in Bulgaria, this money wasn't raised, so they left, and step by step we are expecting that also our government will introduce some schemes, like I know they are in UK, in France, in Italy, for renovating public buildings, because the public buildings, even now I can remember some hospitals in Bulgaria that are with single glazing and without any insulation. They're using gas boilers. But I'm optimistic in the recent years. Good things happen step by step, and also in the future things will get better.
Well, we're running out of time, so I don't know whether we have time for questions. Although I see the audience wants to address some.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yuli, for a very interesting panel, and to all our panelists. We are late with the timing, so instead of cutting the networking time, I suggest that those of you who have questions, you address our panelists in the break. So we will be back at 11:40. Enjoy the networking, and thanks so much again for a very interesting and exciting panel.